Hari Om, Namaste. So, is there a group of people here which is under 18 here? Okay, fine. Because I'll accordingly apply censorship filters. That's the reason for the question. So, see, the question that you've asked is very, very sensitive. It has multiple layers. I'll try my best to keep this as short as possible. Reconversion has its own set of problems. Just as people are capable of converting for reasons other than spirituality, they're also capable of reconverting for reasons other than spirituality. And Hindu philosophy believes in the concept of samskara. And samskaras are transmitted over generations. And in the case of these people, they've been lost for generations. So when you bring them back to the fold, I don't know how many of them will do so due to a true change of conscience or heart. Two, there are other certain delicate and tricky questions involved in reconversion, which I don't wish to discuss at this point. I think it's even more complicated. Then what is the way forward? Because if their numbers continue to grow at the pace at which it currently is, then obviously not only will we become a global minority, in the foreseeable future, we will become a disenfranchised majority in quite a few states and a useless majority across the country, which it already is to the most part. Then the way forward is to temper the tendencies that come with being a member of an Abrahamic faith. The first thing that I would do is to create legal barriers which result in demographic imbalance. Which is to say, there are countries in this world which have very clear laws with respect to the freedom of operation of missionaries in their own territory. Why does India not have the confidence as an indigenous society to take a position against the operation of missionaries within its own land? That's a question that we have to answer. Because except for addressing that issue, we seem to be addressing every other paraphernalia issue. That's the first central question. Does freedom to operate also mean that somebody gets to proselytize, evangelize, seek funds from outside, particularly when the epicenter of allegiance of both these faiths is not within Bharat? It's either in the Middle East or in Europe. 3, I would also want to look at ways of Indianizing their thought process, or let's call it Hinduizing their thought process. And maybe give it a couple of generations, at the very least 2 generations, before welcoming them back to the Hindu fold. Not before that. There may be exceptional instances where you produce somebody like a Kalam or somebody like Sri K.K. Mohammed. But if that's not the case, or for that matter even Sri M, right? These are exceptional instances. And when you speak of the mainstream, you don't speak of exceptions, you speak of the norm. And when you speak of the norm, the general tendency is to not look at an individual, but to look at the group. So I was giving this example last evening when in a conversation with someone. There are several foreign tribes who have been accepted as part of our Varnashrama Dharma. But when they were accepted, they were not accepted on an individual basis, but they were accepted on a group basis. So entire tribes would be accepted either as part of V1, V2, V3, V4, depending on the characteristics that they exhibited. Because you certainly understand the concept of a group think, a group psychology, and certain group attributes. That's not to stereotype people, but to accept that when you come from a common background, then regardless of your individual expressions, there are bound to be certain common attributes that you display across the board. So I would want to wait for at least 2 generations. And until that happens, I would use the time to keep pummeling and hammering the aggressive tendencies. And aggressive tendencies do not respect weakness. They do not respect decent dialogue. That is not going to happen. Maybe there are a few sections within that particular group who may be amenable to this kind of an approach, but by and large they won't. You want examples? Okay, take a look at history. I don't think the aggressive tendency of the Second World War, Germany or Japan, could have been handled through dialogue. Germany had that aggressive anger which spanned at least 4 decades, which caused 2 world wars. And until it was humiliated and pummeled into submission, it was not going to give it up. Similarly, most people argue that where was the need to nuke Japan? Fine, there may have been no necessity to nuke Japan, but the fact is when all other Axis parties had surrendered, this party continued to fight. There were instances where close to 20 or 30 years after the end of the Second World War, Japanese troops who were in hiding in several islands would come out. And they had not surrendered yet, because they had not received communication from the emperor that they were supposed to surrender. This has happened. We have seen people come out in the 60s, 70s, until late 70s, who kept wearing the very same uniform, and they waited in their barracks and other places because either information had not reached or they had chosen not to surrender. When you're dealing with this kind of an aggressive martial mentality, which is not circumscribed by the honor codes of dharma, the response cannot be just mental or intellectual. And which is why when people try and tell me that economy, computers, education, I'm asking them, do you even read history? Do you understand what has happened in the past? Everybody has tried all these tricks in the book. It hasn't worked. I'm sure nobody in early 1900s would have ever anticipated the partition of Bharat in 1947. They would have actually laughed it off as a joke, saying it's a lunatic fringe that believes that they were heading towards partition. No Sindhi Hindu would have thought of it. Punjab, undivided Punjab was actually Muslim majority. Even they wouldn't have thought of it. But it happened nevertheless. And partition was a consolation prize for them, according to them. And if the global, let's say, network had stepped into the picture to help them, they may have actually gotten away with a larger prize. Because the prize is always Bharat. The prize has always been Bharat. So, since it's a largely mature adult audience, I would say, certainly put faith in the concept of dialogue. But the mature mind realizes the limitations of dialogue as well and starts preparing for plan B. That's it.
Hello.
So I usually go through a warm-up phase. I slept at 5 o'clock, so give me a few minutes before the fireworks start. We'll start.
And I just wanted to bring in an observation, sir. Yesterday, Swami Vijnananji addressed the audience here. A youngster had asked Swami Vijnananji that while they can enter or add working or serving under the Catholic Church in their resumes, adding that they worked or served the society under RSS or many other dharmic organizations leads to sort of discrimination or whatever, right? And Swami Vijnananji told, we are not here for perception, we are here to defend. So I think that's similar to what you were talking about. More than intellectual, it's also about getting on ground. And I just have one more question before I open to the audience, and it's a 2-part question.
Before you go to the next question, I'll just answer an extension of this, and this is a very crucial follow-up. You see, Hindu philosophy, or let's say Hindu family of faith systems, has been created around a central core. And whether anybody likes it or not, the central core will remain the Vedic religion under any circumstances. When the Vedic religion remains strong, then looking at that strength, other panths or sampradayas start gravitating around that core, and they have an incentive to stay with the core. But when the Vedic system or the adherents of the Vedic system lose confidence, or they lose the will to assert themselves, not impose themselves, but assert themselves, then the dilution starts at the epicenter and it spreads to all those people who are at the peripheries. You want the best example? A strong core Vedic system would have never allowed the formation of the Khalistani mentality at all. Now you look at the ripple effect and the second order effect of the Khalistani mentality. Now, because the adherents of that particular mentality believe Hinduism is a religion of cowards, I don't wish to be with cowards, so they have gravitated away from you. This will then start with even those sampradayas which see themselves as dharmic sampradayas. Khalistanis of course don't. Because if you believe that strength and power have no role to play even in the realm of religion, then that is rank stupidity in head display. Whether it is religion or the secular world, strength makes a huge difference, because strength translates to conviction. And conviction effectively means that you're willing to walk the talk. So all dharmic minorities will remain within the dharmic fold only when the dharmic core majority continues to assert itself. And the single biggest problem is the dilution of the core, especially after 1857. That's my reading based on discussions with people, that's my reading based on the reading of the material. So until the Vedic religion finds its confidence and realizes that the first missionary faith of the world is the Vedic religion, and as long as it stops deluding itself from constantly believing in this lie that we don't proselytize, no, our ways are different, our means are different, and we hope for a change of conscience. It's neither power nor money, but it's actually a change of heart through experience. Until you actually believe in that reality, you will continue to fight this boxing match with both your hands tied.
Thank you so much, sir. My next question is a two-part question. First is, the year 2025 marks the 50th year of the youth movement of Chinmaya Mission, Chinmaya Yoga Kendra. And a lot of youngsters are here who are part of Chinmaya Yoga Kendra. So what would be your message to the youngsters over here? And the second part of the question is, Swami Chinmayananda was a great visionary for all of us. What aspect of his inspired you?
So, I think in one of my lectures at Hansraj College, I had made this point, that the binary between the mental and the physical needs to be broken. And the need of the hour is what I've said before, is the SIP principle. I would expect young Hindus to be spiritually fit, intellectually fit, and physically fit. You don't have the option of leaving any of these. And I say this as someone who's benefited from all three aspects. It makes a huge impact. I think in 2019, at a temple, at a Durga temple in Sunnyvale, I'd actually made this point. There was a time when Jews were thought of as an exclusively scholarly community or a mercantile community with absolutely no martial aspect to them. Sanatanis are going through a phase where they are also seen in the same mold, and that's terrible. A worldview or a society which has given the concept of Kshatriya to the rest of the world shouldn't go through this kind of an emasculating phase. And that happens when you downplay the importance of physicality. So around that time, Jews were going through a phase of churn. This is before the establishment of the World Jewish Congress in 1897 by Theodor Herzl. They were still wondering what should be the way forward. So quite a few people were looking at political aspects, quite a few people were looking at the societal aspects. So some people basically said, no, we shouldn't have a Jewish state at all, despite being hounded out from several countries of the world. Some people said that if the Jewish state happens, then we will be a persecuted community for the rest of our lives. So let's not do it. Some people basically said that there is something deeply problematic in our faith, and that is why we constantly lose. Can you see the parallels between their thinking and our thinking? Some people said that we lack the physical vigor to defend ourselves, and the only thing that we stuck to was the Torah and the Talmud, and that's why we couldn't defend ourselves. So the non-ultra-Orthodox Jewish communities were targeting the ultra-Orthodox Jewish communities for saying that you only followed the book, but you did not have the guts to stand up. Now you see how the parallels are? Then one person, I think his name was Lev Jabotinsky, basically said, we first need to start from the outside and then move within. We need to change the physical characteristics of the Jew in the first place. All the negative and the weak stereotypes associated with the Jewish entity need to be wiped off, and I need a more physical, masculine Jew, is how it started. Read the literature surrounding the establishment of the Anushilan Samiti in Bengal by Right, I'll just mention. Right. So Anushilan Samiti was set up in Bengal by Sri Aurobindo and others. Okay, fair enough. It's a revolutionary movement where they started setting up akhadas across Bengal, and this was primarily in response to the gravitation towards the partition of Bengal on religious lines. Because most people assume that the worst riots that Bengal has seen is the post-1940 or the direct action day riots. But if you actually look at the literature surrounding the riots of 1905, 1906, it was a dress rehearsal to what happened in 1946. So in response to that, they started actually investing in it. Subsequently, around 1919 onwards, when the Sangathan movement had gradually started, they also started drawing inspiration from several principles of the Anushilan Samiti. So I believe that the way forward for Hindu youth is you have to deal with negative stereotypes of Hinduism in your office spaces, in your college spaces, in your school spaces, wherever it is. For that, you need to be able to find for yourself a spiritual grounding, because these battles cannot be fought with pure knowledge. Knowledge is only ammunition that helps you meet a particular argument. But if there is a single contribution that I would say that I have brought to the table over the last 6-7 years, it's not just argumentation. It is the ferocity with which I argue, it is the belief with which I argue, it is the conviction with which I argue, and that conviction will never come unless and until you practice your faith. So practice of your faith on a daily basis and sadhana of some kind is absolutely crucial. It is not meant for the people with the salt and pepper hair. It's meant for people across the age groups, and I think it's very crucial that you do it as early as possible. Particularly at a time when you're vulnerable to distractions from several directions, it's important that you find that spiritual core. 2, and I'll connect this answer to the second part of the question. Second is intellectually fit. Your ignorance of your faith is used against you, because the first bomb that is thrown at you is the caste bomb, and you don't have any answer to that particular bomb. You have no idea how to deal with it. You have no idea how to deal with it because they will start with CSP, caste, sati, patriarchy, period, and you're done. Caste, sati, and patriarchy. Sati and patriarchy, and after that you have zero answers. The moment this trifecta is thrown at you, you have no idea as to how to deal with it, because neither have your parents taught you as to what is the reality, nor do history textbooks necessarily aid this process. The physical aspect is important because I have seen this personally, that when the opposite side knows that it's losing an argument, it starts showing its true colors, which is physical in nature. If someone believes that I've always had only verbal arguments, please don't be under that impression. Because campuses are not easy places to survive with this kind of an opinion. There have been instances, especially in the great state of Tamil Nadu, where people would come and wipe off the vibhuti and go while you're walking on campuses. All sorts of slurs will be hurled against you. So, I have been through everything that you're either going through or will be going through. So, and therefore, my ability to connect with your experience, that's where it comes from. One, I would say, is that every community and every family obviously has had some kind of sampradaya that it has subscribed to. There is a very clear reason why I ask people to go back to their own sampradayas. One, when you go back to your sampradaya, which will necessarily have a caste element to it, or a jati or a varna element to it, you will realize the nexus between your jati identity or your varna identity and the sampradaya that you subscribe to. That will offset the sense of shame that is associated with the caste identity. And that will tell you that everyone has a place in the dharmic fold. Second, it ensures continuity in terms of a certain heritage. In quite a few places, most of the Kula Devata temples do not have the next generation of Purohits because nobody is there to take care of the temple anymore. So that's critical. 3, unlike others, every day of the week is a Hindu day. We don't need a Saturday or a Sunday or a Friday. Right? Choose one day. You have a responsibility towards 3 sets of deities. Your Kula Devata, your Grama Devata, and your Ishta Devata. Start with the first 2. Destiny will lead you towards the third, whenever it is meant to. Don't let go of it. This is where Swami Chinmayananda's contribution comes. Because if there are 2 movements in this country which have managed to attract youth towards Hindu Dharma, one is Ramakrishna Mission and second is Swami Chinmayananda. They have made Hindu Dharma more relatable, and their brilliance was their ability to repackage Hindu Dharma in a manner that it could be fed. Idli has to be fed to the McDonald's generation, so they made Make Idli. This is crucial. The core remains the same. It is the presentation that has changed so that that message is relevant to the circumstances that you live in. And take it from me, and I say this with no sense of arrogance at all. Everyone who is contributing to the messaging is actually doing the very same thing. We are drawing from the very same core literature, and we are trying to repackage and tailor it to your existing circumstances so that you know how to apply it in your situations. So I don't think we're all presenting anything original. The originality lies in articulation and presentation, not in the core message. That remains the same because Sanatana Dharma has always been the same. Next.
Thank you so much, sir. I now open the floor to questions from the audience.
Hari Om, sir. My name is Gokul Vaibhav. Presently, I am here for you, especially. My cousin said J Sai Deepak is arriving to this event. Without hesitation, I came here. But when I see this chick, I don't know about Chinmaya Mission first, but when I see the events through 4 days, was biggest fan of chick. Now I love chick, I have to be chick. And I am chick and I want to be. And I have 2 things for you, sir. And first thing is I need a picture and autograph with you. Definitely. And the question is, if I give you a time machine to go back into the modern Indian history, which chapter of modern Indian history you want to change and why? Thank you. Hari Om, sir.
So, I have a very old relationship with Chick. Most people don't know this. So, when I was in engineering in Coimbatore, 2002 to 2006, Chick came out with India Quiz. I think this was around 2004-5.
Awakening
Sorry.
Indians to Awaken India.
Correct, exactly. So that was my first visit to a Chinmaya center in Coimbatore. That's where I think I was, and that book was a fantastic primer, brilliant primer, where the ancient, the medieval, and the modern aspects or contemporary aspects of Bharati history were captured in a simple book, and they were made. They made it very attractive by conducting quiz competitions based on that. So the material was given to you, you were expected to go through it, make sense of it, and then come back for the quiz. So that was brilliant. Now coming to the question of which phase in history. There are two particular phases. I don't believe that the Muslim invasion phase is actually a phase of defeat. I don't see it as defeat at all. It took us a while to gather our wits and understand what exactly are we dealing with. Because you see, I think for several centuries we made the mistake of projecting our rules of civility and code of war onto a barbaric code. You were giving them the benefit of doubt that the dignity and civility with which you were willing to fight a battle is the exact dignity and civility with which he was willing to fight a battle, which was never the case. So that took a while. And when you started paying him back in the same coin is when the aggression came down. Okay? And there, two legends stand out. I would say the first legend in this regard, who understood how this beast had to be tackled in a very, very realistic way, and perhaps the smartest of ways possible, which remains relevant even today, is Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. So, you have to ask yourself, how does a man who was barely 5 foot 6 inches carve out an island of saffron in an ocean of green? That's amazing. And I would say he was a personification of Shakti and Yukti going hand in hand. That's why that example is so relevant. Because you need to know how to beat the tiger, you also need to know how to beat the snake. I leave it to your imagination. 2. So, 1857 was, according to me, the first period of decline. Not because we lost the battle of independence. I don't think it was a battle of independence at all. I have no such illusions. The majority of it was an attempt at reviving the Mughal Empire, at least by the Muslim participants. They were absolutely clear about it. There are enough documents to show this. There is no way people can convince me that this was some kind of a united movement. No, it was not. So 1857 was crucial because that was a time for Hindus to at least learn their lessons at that point. They did not. And their commitment to their dharma, especially their aspects of Nitya Karma, started diluting from 1857. Because you see, until then, British regiments were based on specific caste identities or Varna identities. And they realized after that episode that until this conviction is diluted, we will continue to face resistance one way or the other, at least cultural resistance. And therefore they started introducing certain rules of employment for the British establishment which required you to give up your identities. And that's where the dilution starts. When you start moving away from the most proximal identity of your dharma, which is practiced through your ritualized Nitya Karma activities, the movement away from the larger identity starts. That's where the first downfall began. The second is, I would say, the 1900s, where Congress and its hypocrisy was completely exposed, and there was a time when people understood the value of revolutionaries. And the revolutionary movement continued to be a parallel movement. I wish it had been the mainstream movement. then we would have not inherited this legacy of this icon of peace, unfortunately. That is something that should have never happened. So I had a few communist professors when I was in law school in Bengal. And I agreed with one of the professors who said this, rightly so, that we haven't shed enough blood to secure our independence. And therefore, the history of the 75 years later, after independence, is a history of us compensating for lack of shedding of blood. And it was 100% true. If independence is seen as a yajna, yajna needs an ahuti, and if it asks for bali, don't give it pumpkin. Bali is bali. Don't compensate for bali with either a lemon or a pumpkin. Give it what it asks for. Because you can shortchange the yajna there, but it will have an impact later. So these are the two phases where I think our Kshatriya spirit ought to have been revived significantly. 1857 also, because it was barely 35, 57, you're barely looking at 20 years from the introduction of the English education system as the mainstream system. So the impact hadn't started yet, not yet. We could have still overcome that impact if we had resisted thoroughly. So these are the only two phases. Now, you have to realize that sometimes, even if you don't win in a particular phase, if you're vocal in a particular phase, you serve as an inspiration for the subsequent generation who will take that message forward. So, I never look at victories and defeats in a small time span of 50 years or 60 years or whatever it is. The minimum period that you should be looking at is a century to see the impact of a particular activity. So I would look at 1857 and perhaps 1914 or 1919, just before the Khilafat movement started, as the two milestones where Hindu mentality could have been changed. And where you could have stopped yourself from watering this green cactus called the Khilafat movement. That is something we could have stopped. And since we did not, we paid the price for it 24 years later. Next.